Democrats, and they love talking about it. But I would like to see people exposed that might be bad, and we'll see how that all works out. But it's getting to be very old news. You know, if they had anything, they would have done it the week before the election because they were losing by a lot. If they had anything, they would have done it. They control the file.
Señores, la presidencia de Donald Trump se está desmoronando cada día. Las tarifas fracasaron. Su presupuesto ha sido calificado como el peor proyecto legislativo en la historia moderna. Y como si eso no fuese lo suficiente, ahora el escándalo de Jeffrey Epstein sigue explotando con nuevas revelaciones. Pero lo que realmente ha estado alarmando a su círculo más cercano no es solo lo político, es Trump. Su salud mental, señores, está en caída libre. Y el día de ayer, durante una conferencia de prensa, fue bastante evidente. Confundido, perdido y rodeado de asistentes que ya no saben cómo ocultar el colapso cognitivo de su jefe. Todo esto comenzó con lo que parecía un discurso de rutina, ¿no? Sobre el tema de los aranceles. Escuchemos.
We're now negotiating with various other countries, and the rest we're just sending out the bill to. We send a letter saying that you'll pay a certain tariff. And obviously, that's most of them because you have, as you know, hundreds of countries. There are a lot of countries out there. So we look at the deficit or we look at the surplus and we look at the country and how the country's treated us, and lots of other things go into the equation. And we make a decision as to what that tariff will be, and it's a pretty standard letter from that point on. And I want to tell you, this is something to me, it's a VA bill signing, and it's very important to me and to many of the people in this room.
Pues Donald Trump luce agotado, algo desorientado, la voz un poco cansada, ¿no? Sin energía. Al parecer, su viaje oficial a su propio club de golf, sus vacaciones de medio tiempo, lo dejó sin fuerzas. ¿O será que los constantes escándalos de Epstein, que lo persiguen a donde vaya, le están pasando factura? No lo sabemos, pero lo que sí vimos fue a un Trump débil, un Trump confundido, alguien balbuceando frases sin sentido. Y lo peor es que estaba rodeado de personas, y eso al parecer se le olvidó por completo.
He said what?
Of Russiagate materials
I
that
don't
the
know
guy
that.
supposedly found.
I don't know that. I don't know what you mean by that statement. Say
Bags full of Russiagate
Oh,
documents.
Bird Bag. I thought you said
Well,
appointed a man named Bird Bag. Go ahead. You got to speak up.
Thousands of documents in these bags, supposedly burn bags at the FBI in the secret room.
Well, I want everything to be shown. You know, as long as it's fair and reasonable, I think it will be shown and it should be shown. And I think he feels that way, and I think Pam feels that way. But it's got to be, it's got to be stuff that really doesn't hurt people unfairly, because you have so many people involved. And if they can do that in a fair way, I think it's great. I think it's really great. The whole thing is a scam. It's a scam set up by the Democrats, and they love talking about it. But I would like to see people exposed that might be bad, and we'll see how that all works out. But it's getting to be very old news. You know, if they had anything, they would have done it the week before the election because they were losing by a lot. If they had anything, they would have done it. They control the file. The Democrats controlled it. Comey and all this, sleazebags, every one of them that you read about all the time. And I guess they've got some problems now having to do with yet a different scandal, very big one. But they control that file. So I would think that if they would have had something in the file, they would have released it about a week before the election. Maybe 2 weeks, right, Brian? Go ahead.
Mr. President. Y es que lo más alarmante no fue solo lo que dijo, sino cómo reaccionó su equipo. Porque hay fuentes internas que dicen que los asesores están en modo pánico. No solo por el estado mental, sino por algo muy específico. Y es que temen que el escándalo de Epstein le haga perder algo sagrado para Trump: el tamaño de sus multitudes. Así es, señores. Reportes señalan que en la Casa Blanca están preocupados porque la base MAGA está furiosa en la forma en la cual Trump está manejando el caso Epstein. El Departamento de Justicia anunció que Epstein, pues, como bien sabemos, sí se suicidó y que no habrá lista de clientes. Y bueno, eso para los seguidores de Trump es algo totalmente inaceptable. Una encuesta del Washington Post reveló que solo el 43% de los republicanos MAGA aprueban la forma en la cual Trump ha manejado este tema. El resto está enojado, está confundido o está decepcionado. Y eso, señores, en año electoral es dinamita pura. Como si eso no fuese suficiente, Donald Trump intentó desviar la atención con uno de los clásicos rants incoherentes. Esta vez hablando sobre los padres de familia, las escuelas y los woke.
It was. Many parents are preparing to send their kids back to school in a few weeks. Now, this will be the first time they've gone back to school under the second administration for you. Now, the previous administration labeled a lot of parents domestic terrorists for showing up to school board meetings. What's your message to parents now as they return their kids to school knowing that they have the support of you?
Well, the beautiful thing is, as you know, we've gotten rid of the woke. Woke is gone, and I think pretty well buried. We're going to make sure it's buried. But the parents are now taking over the school boards. They're getting rid of these people that probably didn't like the children very much based on what they were doing. And it's a big difference. And, you know, one of the other things, and I keep watching these talking points that the Democrats have, they say, oh, prices are up. No, prices are way down.
Yo me pregunto, ¿de qué hablan? ¿Derrotó a lo woke al quitar el desayuno escolar? ¿Acaso es woke comer frutas frescas? ¿Comer plátanos? Porque gracias a sus tarifas ahora cuestan 25% más. Y señores, los que pagan las consecuencias son los niños. La verdad es que el discurso no tenía ni pies ni cabeza. Pero lo que sí quedó claro es que Trump no está bien. Ni físicamente ni mentalmente. Su lenguaje corporal, esa mirada perdida, el tono de voz, todo grita declive total.
Time now for Money, Power, Politics. And tonight, we start with this headline from the New York Times. Quote, Trump is winning his trade war. What will it mean for the actual economy? We've seen him use his leverage to announce new trade deals around the world that include big tariff rates, levels that would have seemed unimaginable 6 months ago. Let's be clear. Trump is remaking the world economy around tariffs, something he has been talking about for more than a decade. He's defying expectations, and right now the U.S. economy is holding up. But the big question is, how long will this last? There are plenty of unknowns swirling around the so-called deals themselves. Will they even hold up? Many of the deals are light on details, and countries could push to rewrite them when they have the leverage. In some cases, like with Japan, it seems like these two countries cannot even agree on what they agreed to. As far as all of these promised investments go, we might not actually ever see them. You might remember in Trump's first term, he struck a deal with China that included a promise to purchase $200 billion of American exports. That never happened. And then there were these tariffs that are already directly impacting Americans. Procter & Gamble says that people are spending less, shopping less, and only buying things they really need. Remember, these are 10 and 15% tariff rates in the trade deals that are still huge increases. Yes, they're not 50%, but 10% is still big. That means that American companies, big and small, are suddenly facing much higher costs, leaving them to decide whether to swallow that cost and lay off workers or pass it on to you, the consumer. So Trump may be winning, but are Americans? What about us? Joining me to discuss, Dan Nathan, CNBC contributor and co-host of the Risk Reversal podcast, and Natasha Surin, former Treasury official and Yale Law professor. What's your thought? Trump says he's winning the trade war. He is getting trade deals or frameworks done.
Right, they're frameworks, right? So when we think about just going back to the first administration, when they first slapped tariffs on China, it's 2018. It was March. We didn't really have a phase one deal in place with China until January of 2020. So you kind of just laid it out here. We have a deal supposedly with Japan. We have a deal with the EU. If you think about those two blocks, they're about 25% of the imports that we get right here. And we just don't really have a lot of detail about that. So what hasn't come to the table right now? It's Canada and Mexico. They're about 25% of our imports. Those are two of our best allies here, right? And so this week, the focus has been on China. Well, they're about 10% of our imports. So when you think about the Chinese, you think about how nothing's really happened over the last, let's call it, week or so as we've kind of had these talks here, especially in Stockholm over the last few days. You have to ask yourself, if you're the Chinese, why are you rushing to do a deal if we are not even able to do a deal with our two biggest trading partners, which is Canada and Mexico? So I think there's not going to be a lot of there. And just really quickly on your point about who's winning right now, because the economy, what is our our economy saying? Well, right now we saw a huge pull forward. A lot of American companies were buying goods. A lot of consumers were buying goods right before these tariffs might go in place. And therefore, you've seen artificially inflated numbers, whether they be by companies and their earnings or by our GDP that we're going to get a read on tomorrow. But the real reason that the Fed is staying on hold, we have a Fed meeting tomorrow, is because they have to see what the inflationary pressures are going to be. You just said Procter & Gamble. These are staples. They're raising prices. They're passing it through to consumers. These are all the reasons why the Fed is on inflation watch here, and that's going to be the thing, the bugaboo, I guess, for the U.S. economy. If growth starts to slow, but inflation starts to tick up, we have stagflation.
Well, it's, what does winning a trade war look like? The Yale Budget Lab has a new report out laying out the impact these tariffs are having actually on us, not just headlines. Break it down for us.
Yeah, so first fact that we should all kind of wrap our heads around is no one actually wins from protectionism. So there are no winners from a trade war. Some numbers that my colleagues and I have put together that I think can provide some helpful context on where we are today. We have effective tariff rates in this country as of current that are about 18%. That is up from about 2.5% at the beginning of this administration. Those effective tariff rates are going to lead to price increases on literally everything that Americans buy, on the order of magnitude of something like 35% for apparel or 12% for consumer electronics. And the reason why those price increases are going to exist and maybe haven't fully kicked in yet in some sense in certain industries like apparel is because there has been this pull forward of inventory in anticipation of these tariffs. What importers were trying to do was try to kind of pull in as much as they could into the economy in order to have to avoid the fact that ultimately they are going to have to raise prices because there simply is no way to eat a tariff of 18% when you were operating in a world that was more like 2 just a few months.
Las tarifas de Trump han sido un desastre económico. No han traído empleos, no han hecho que China pague por nada y solo termina castigando al consumidor promedio. A ti, a mí, a las familias, a tu vecino, etc. Y ahora, para poder ocultar este fracaso, Donald Trump intenta distraernos con ataques a la prensa, con ataques a figuras como Jessica Tarlov de Fox News, con discursos delirantes sobre cosas que ni siquiera le entienden. Pero eso ya no funciona. El país está viendo el colapso, en las encuestas, en los discursos, en las reacciones de su propio equipo. Y lo más grave, en su mente. Donald Trump se está cayendo a pedazos. Su presidencia, su escándalo con Epstein y su partido dividido.
At today's meeting, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 4.25% to 4.5% and to continue reducing the size of our balance sheet. We will continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
Señores, la Reserva Federal prácticamente salvó la economía de Estados Unidos el día de ayer contra Donald Trump. Con una aplastante votación de 9-2, el presidente de la Fed, Jerome Powell, prácticamente le sacó el dedo del medio de la forma más elegante posible al presidente Trump. Como bien sabemos, lleva semanas presionando para que baje las tasas de interés. Aún así, teniendo en cuenta los datos económicos, que nos dicen todo lo contrario. Señores, este video será un poco diferente porque, aparte de ver esta noticia, voy a explicarles por qué es que esto es muy importante. ¿Qué es lo que está sucediendo realmente en la economía? ¿Y cómo es que la obsesión por parte de Trump con querer manipular la Reserva Federal es algo que puede terminar hundiendo al país? Pues bueno, amigos, en la última reunión que vimos del Comité de Mercados Abiertos el día de ayer, la Fed votó por mantener las tasas tal cual como están. Resultado, 9-2 en contra de Trump. ¿Quiénes fueron los dos únicos votos que salieron a favor de bajarlas? Los dos leales a Trump, que son Chris Ware y Michael Bowman. Curiosamente, son los que están, digamos que coqueteando o probando suerte para convertirse en futuros presidentes de la Reserva. ¿Casualidad? Difícil de creer. Donald Trump lleva meses amenazando, presionando, insultando, hasta sugiriendo con encarcelar a Jerome Powell si es que no le hace caso. El problema es que no puede hacerlo. Ya la Corte Suprema ha dejado claro esto. No se puede despedir al presidente de la Reserva Federal sin tener una verdadera causa justificada. Así que, pues una vez más, Donald Trump quedó como un payaso. El Wall Street lo sabe y por eso nadie le hace caso. Donald Trump no quiere solo una bajadita de tasas, no señores. Él quiere que bajen 2 o 3 puntos enteros. ¿Por qué? Porque su modelo económico, al cual yo creo que deberíamos empezar a clasificar como Trumpnomics, no funciona, son un desastre. Sus políticas han frenado el gasto de los consumidores. Y señores, en Estados Unidos, el consumo es el motor de la economía. Si quieres despedir a cientos de miles de empleados públicos, si cierras departamentos enteros como el de educación o el de Estado, si recortas programas sociales como el Medicare, Medicaid o hasta el Seguro Social, ¿quién va a gastar? Eso es lo que está viendo la Fed. No inflación de salarios, no crecimiento, estancamiento. Y encima las tarifas de Trump están empezando a reflejarse en los precios. Hablamos desde gasolina hasta el supermercado. Todo está subiendo gracias a sus guerras comerciales absurdas.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Despite elevated uncertainty, the economy is in a solid position. The unemployment rate remains low, and the labor market is at or near maximum employment. Inflation has been running somewhat above our 2% longer run objective. In support of our goals, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged. We believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments. I will have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that growth of economic activity has moderated. GDP rose at a 1.2% pace in the first half of this year, down from 2.5% last year. Although the increase in the second quarter was stronger at 3%, focusing on the first half of the year helps smooth through the volatility in the quarterly figures related to the unusual swings in net exports. The moderation in growth largely reflects a slowdown in consumer spending. In contrast, business investment in equipment and intangibles picked up from last year's pace. Activity in the housing sector remains weak. In the labor market, conditions have remained solid. Payroll job gains averaged 150,000 per month over the past 3 months. The unemployment rate at 4.1% remains low and has stayed in a narrow range over the past year. Wage growth has continued to moderate while still outpacing inflation. Overall, a wide set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are broadly in balance and consistent with maximum employment. Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.5% over the 12 months ending in June, and that, excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.7%. These readings are little changed from the beginning of the year, although the underlying composition of price changes has shifted. Services inflation has continued to ease, while increased tariffs are pushing up prices in some categories of goods. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have moved up on balance over the course of this year on news about tariffs, as reflected in both market-based and survey-based measures. Beyond the next year or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 4.25% to 4.5%, and to continue reducing the size of our balance sheet. We will continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook and the balance of risks.
Como acabamos de ver, Jerome Powell no se va a dejar presionar. Él tiene la razón, tiene el respaldo legal, tiene a la mayoría del comité con él. Mientras tanto, pues Trump sigue hablando de que se necesita dinero barato, porque su modelo económico es prácticamente una estafa piramidal a punto de colapsar. Él puede gritar, puede patalear, puede publicar lo que quiera en Truth Social a las 3 de la mañana, pero si se mete con la Reserva Federal, Wall Street lo va a destruir. Las agencias de calificación de crédito como los Moody's ya le han advertido que si intenta despedir a Jerome Powell, van a degradar la calificación del crédito del país. El resultado, pues vamos a hablar de préstamos más caros, deudas impagables y una economía en caída libre. Donald Trump lo sabe, por eso aunque sigue ladrando, no muerde. Sabe que no puede hacer nada. ¿Y saben qué es lo más patético, señores? La semana pasada apareció con Jerome Powell con un casquito de obrero, un papelito en la mano, diciendo que la Fed se había pasado del presupuesto por $3,000 millones. La respuesta de Powell: señor, ese edificio del que habla fue construido hace 5 años, bajo su presidencia. No tiene nada que ver con este presupuesto. Una humillación en vivo. Una más. Donald Trump no tiene un plan. Solo quiere manipular la economía para que parezca que todo va bien antes de las elecciones intermedias. Pero ni siquiera el Wall Street le cree. Y mientras él juega al dictador financiero, la Reserva Federal hace lo que puede para evitar esta recesión masiva. Por eso, señores, hoy más que nunca, hay que llamar las cosas por su nombre. Trumpnomics son un fracaso.
But also, the family of Virginia Giuffre released a statement overnight in response to some of the comments that you made this week. You said that Jeffrey Epstein stole people from Mar-a-Lago. At the time, did you know why he was taking those young women, including Virginia?
No, I
which is
didn't know.
16
I
at the
mean,
time?
I would figure it was ABC fake news that would ask that question, one of the worst. But no, I don't know really why. But I said if he's taking anybody from Mar-a-Lago, he's hiring or whatever he's doing. I didn't like it, and we threw him out. We said we don't want him, at the place. This is a story that's been known for many years, as you know. But it's I didn't like it that he was doing that.
Señores, lo que acaban de ver es a Donald Trump tratando de responder una simple pregunta sobre las fechas que rodean su relación con Jeffrey Epstein. Y que como tantas cosas alrededor de su vida simplemente no cuadran. Se los explico. Hace apenas unos días, él dijo lo siguiente.
Just curious, were some of the workers that were taken from you, were some of them young women?
Were some of them?
Were some of them young women?
Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken, and it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad, but that story's been pretty well out there, and the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
What did they do?
In the spa.
Jobs. In the spa.
Yeah, it's people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world at Mar-a-Lago, and people were taken out of the spa, hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine. And then not too long after that, he did it again. And I said, out of here.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, does that include Virginia Giuffre?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah, he stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know, none whatsoever.
Él afirma que no sabía por qué Epstein llevaba a esas mujeres con él. Digamos que tal vez sea cierto. Pero repasemos una de las frases más famosas de Trump, publicada por el New York Magazine en el año 2002. Conozco a Jeff desde hace 15 años. Es un tipo genial, muy divertido. Incluso se dice que le gustan las mujeres hermosas tanto como a mí. y que muchas de ellas son bastante jóvenes. No hay duda de que Jeffrey disfruta la vida social. Amigos, esa cita no es cualquier cosa. Virginia Giuffre trabajaba en Mar-a-Lago en el año 2000. Fue en el año 2001 que Epstein comenzó a traficarla. La cita de Trump elogiando los gustos de Epstein por mujeres jóvenes es del 2002. No estoy diciendo directamente que Trump lo sabía todo, pero como que las fechas hablan por sí solas. Y claro, en vez de explicar esta contradicción, Donald Trump hace lo que siempre hace: atacar a los medios. Pero en esta ocasión ni siquiera fueron ellos quienes sacaron el tema. Fue la propia gente que él eligió para gobernar.
Say that the FBI has Epstein's list, they're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
We have flight logs, we have information, names that will come out.
Is it going to be shocking?
I don't see how it's not shocking that there were so many individuals that were hidden and kept secret and not been held accountable. Let's talk about the reverse. I believe in accountability. So you have to now go through your process. Now, I won't say they're guilty until they go through their time in court. But again, now it's time for accountability.
A lot of people are wondering, because you said last week that you have the Epstein files on your desk, is when can we see them and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims, 200. So we have, well over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office.
What kind? Are we going to see who was on the flights? Are we going to see any evidence from what he recorded? Because he had all of his homes wired with recording devices.
Yeah, what you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information. But it's pretty sick what that man did.
Okay, well, we'll
along
look
with
for
his
that.
co-defendant.
Absolutely, and he had help. That's for
He
sure.
sure did.
The Ghislaine Maxwell Black Book. What names are in there, man? You understand how many powerful people probably want this thing to desperately go away? How many people were interconnected with this Epstein sex ring operation? There are a lot of tapes out there of a lot of people. I'm not ever going to let this story go because of what I heard from a source about Bill Clinton on a plane with Jeffrey Epstein. I talked about it yesterday. You can go check it out. I'm not letting it go ever. Ever.
Y es que la realidad es que Donald Trump nunca tuvo esta intención de liberar los archivos de Epstein. Lo prometió durante los meses de campaña porque sabía que muchos seguidores querían respuestas. Sabía que su base radical le gustaría el morbo de saber la lista de los clientes de Epstein. Pero terminó siendo otra mentira. Él sabía que no los iba a liberar. Solo estaba utilizando este escándalo para poder manipular esta base que ella tenía acostumbrado con las conspiraciones, prometiendo justicia que nunca pensaba entregar. Por ejemplo, aquí lo vemos diciendo exactamente eso.
A lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein.
You raised the question of Jeffrey Epstein in your remarks about in the Q&A.
Well, I think he's got a problem. I mean,
what do you think the problem will be?
I don't know, but that island was really a cesspool. There's no question about it. Just ask Prince Andrew. He'll tell you about it. The island was an absolute cesspool.
Según él, todo fue una conspiración demócrata. Por eso, convenientemente, nunca se publicaron los archivos. Hablamos del plan perfecto. Claro, si tus votantes son lo suficientemente ingenuos como para creerlo. Pero ahora tenemos el panorama mucho más claro. Donald Trump no solo mintió sobre Epstein, miente sobre todo. Es esta forma de operar. No cree en nada, no defiende nada, no le importa nada, excepto su propio poder. No es solo con Epstein. ¿Cuántas promesas él hizo solo en su primer mandato? La famosa gran ley de infraestructura que nunca apareció. El sistema de salud más barato y mejor. Nunca existió. Recortes de impuestos para la clase media. Nunca llegaron hasta el día de hoy. El boom de los empleos, que terminó siendo un espejismo. Y no nos olvidemos la resurrección manufacturera, que terminó convirtiéndose en más fábricas cerradas. Nada de eso se cumplió. Pero sí se aseguró de aprobar recortes de impuestos que terminan beneficiando al mismo. Y ahora pues está repitiendo exactamente la misma receta. Bajará los precios, que traerá justicia, que luchará contra la élite corrupta. La diferencia es que ahora ya sabemos que es falso. No ha entregado nada salvo beneficios para él y sus aliados. La gran estafa de Trump no es solo personal, señores, es algo estructural. Él te prometió destruir el estado profundo, cuando en realidad él representa el estado profundo. El mismo club de élites ricos, élites poderosos, élites corruptos, que solo buscan protegerse entre sí. Este escándalo ha llegado a tal punto que los votantes han tenido que salir públicamente a decir que quieren que se liberen los archivos de una vez por todas.
Welcome back. As President Trump tries to move away from the controversy over the Jeffrey Epstein files, not all of his supporters are ready to. Some new polling by the Washington Post shows 86% of Americans want all of the files from this case released, including 83% of Republicans. NBC's Shaquille Brewster's with us now live from St. Clair, Michigan. Shaq, that's an overwhelmingly conservative area. Trump won 2/3 of the vote there in November. What are you hearing from people there about how the president's handling the Epstein files?
Well, Anna, the conversations I've been having have reflected that polling that you were just showing. There is broad support for releasing all of the files that the federal government has. And you do also see a bit of a fracture of support among Republicans when you ask them specifically, how is Trump handling this issue? You know, and one nugget in the poll cites about 24% of Republicans saying that they disapprove of how the president is handling this. I want you to listen to some of the conversations I've been having here. Trump administration, they're not releasing those files right now. It sounds like you want to see more.
I think you need to. I'm more concerned about immigration, about the economy.
I don't know why they're not releasing them. I couldn't tell you why. I would like to see transparency. Yeah. I would like to see everything released.
You support the administration not releasing those files?
I just support President Trump and Vance.
Democrats had it for 4 years too. They didn't want anything to do with it, but now they do. So to me, it's I think they are going to release it eventually. I don't think it's a big deal one way or the other to me.
And those conversations, Anna, underscore a key distinction here, especially as you have that uproar in conservative circles about the lack of the release of those files. Even as some say they disapprove of what the Trump administration is doing in their position right now, that doesn't mean they're breaking their support from President Trump just yet. They're giving him more time, even as they want to see more disclosure and more transparency, Anna.
Chuck Brewster, as always, good to have you and good to hear from the voters. Thank you. Joining us now is Amy Parnes, senior political correspondent at The Hill, and former Republican Congressman and MSNBC political analyst Carlos Curbelo. Congressman, the Republican voters that we just heard from there with Shaq seem to agree that they want the files released, but they're more concerned about other things like the economy. Could that change the longer this drags on?
Well, Anna, we don't think that people are going to abandon President Trump if they're already a part of his base. But where this really does matter is how enthusiastic is the base for the midterm elections. Democrats saw recently what it's like to have a base that's deflated, that isn't excited about turning out. This controversy is a big deal for the base because, remember, this is a base that was built on distrust of government institutions, on skepticism, on questioning the establishment, on the idea that there are these conspiracies that people are covering up, that powerful people are covering up. Donald Trump has always been, up to this point, the person to challenge, right, all of that. But in this case, some of his base voters now view him as someone who is trying to keep information from the public, who is acting like a lot of those establishment figures that he has criticized so strongly. So base enthusiasm is what Republicans are worried about when they think about this Epstein controversy.
Amy, what do you think, based on your reporting? Could this controversy, unlike so many others, end up being an albatross for the president?
Not yet. I mean, when I talk to Republicans, they're annoyed by it. They want a release of the files, but they also are saying, you know, they still love Trump. They still love what he's doing. Democrats, on the other hand, are trying to kind of seize a political opportunity here and say, look, you know, Donald Trump is responsible for this. Let's bring out the, you know, let's see more of this. And so they're trying to seize that opportunity. But I think that they're also saying, look, we lost because of the economy. And we have to keep our eyes on portraying this economy as Donald Trump's economy and owning it. And look, the price of beef is higher right now. Lumber is higher right now. If we can talk about, and I'm talking about Democrats, if they can talk about that, they think that is more of a winning issue long term.
And we just reported today, the latest inflation report shows prices are ticking up right now. The other big headline here politically, guys, is the former Vice President, Kamala Harris, announcing that she will not be running for governor of California. Although we have also learned she is writing a new book about her 2024 campaign. We're also learning she's going to be on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert tonight in her first interview since the 2024 election. Amy, do you think this sets a stage for another presidential run?
Definitely. I mean, my reporting a month ago was that she was leaning toward jumping in the governor's race, but her advisors told me that, you know, not so fast. She's still trying to decide, what does this mean for my political future? She wants a seat at the table. She wants to remain in public service. So a lot of people are saying, yes, this is definitely an indication that she felt like she almost won the election. If the election would have gone on a little longer, she could have won. And so maybe this is her chance at a do-over.
And Congressman, what do you make of Harris's decision? And what could it mean for now the 2028 presidential field?
Y por eso, señores, la próxima vez recuerden, Donald Trump no es el enemigo del sistema. Él es el sistema. Y su único objetivo siempre ha sido el mismo: utilizar a sus votantes para llegar al poder. Y luego olvidarse de todo lo que prometió.
So I wouldn't roll over, and I've told the Prime Minister, do not roll over, hit that guy back as hard as we possibly can, and that's what we need to do.
Señores, Canadá está furioso con el régimen trumpista. Pero yo diría que están más allá de furiosos, están determinados, están despiertos y están listos para enfrentarse al matón de la Casa Blanca. Donald Trump acaba de imponer aranceles del 35% a Canadá. Y como era de esperarse, los vecinos del norte están más preparados que nunca para este ataque, porque ya conocen a Trump. Una de las razones que dieron los trumpistas para imponer los aranceles, porque Canadá se atrevió a reconocer al Estado palestino. Así de absurdo. Canadá no se quedó callado porque desde el Partido Conservador hasta los liberales y todo el espectro político se ha unido para hacerle frente a Trump. Uno de los líderes que alzó la voz con mucha fuerza es el premier conservador de Ontario y es Doug Ford. Escuchemos.
So I wouldn't roll over, and I've told the Prime Minister, do not roll over, hit that guy back as hard as we possibly can, and that's what we need to do.
Poderoso, señores. Para que puedan entender el contexto completo, quiero que veamos una versión completa del fragmento de este discurso. Escuchemos bien.
Going back to your comments earlier about President Trump and the trade war, do you think it's possible for Canada to get a deal with Trump that doesn't include tariffs on certain sectors like auto, steel, aluminum, and energy? And would you be satisfied with a sectoral tariff deal?
Well, great question. You know what's a problem with President Trump? And, you know, we're united. First of all, I've never seen this country more united, ever, in all my years of being in politics. And it's a great feeling, all provinces, territories, municipalities, and the federal government. But, you know, Prime Minister Carney's trying his best, but this guy will say something one day, and he'll wake up, and the cheese slips off the cracker, and then all of a sudden he goes the other way. And you're thinking, how do you deal with a guy like this? Are we hoping that we can get a deal with zero tariffs? Yes. But I always say how we can kick back, and it's not the American people, kick back at President Trump. Let's start onshoring everything, absolutely everything we possibly can. Like I-beams, those big steel I-beams. I didn't realize we don't make them here until found out during the trade deal. Or the rails that are beautiful, their cars are going to be made. The streetcars are going to be made down the street. We don't make the rails, so we need to start making rails and start making sure that we make those steel I-beams and aluminum cans. Now, aluminum cans are my favorite. The Coke, the Pepsis, all the other beverages, the Molsons, the Labatt's, the craft brewers. We're the kings of aluminum in Quebec. They ship the aluminum down, 25% tariff. They get printed and formed, 25% back tariffs. So my question was, why aren't we making aluminum cans here? Now we're going to be making aluminum cans. They're going to lose $1 billion worth of business in the U.S. And same with tin cans from Dofasco. Ship it down to the U.S. They get formed. I had a meeting with the big users of the tins. Now we're bringing a line up here. And they're going to be losing out on about 1.3 billion cans just on the tin cans. But we can build anything here. We're an economic powerhouse. You know, folks, we don't have to take a back seat to anyone in the world, and we sure the heck don't have to take a back seat to President Trump. He needs to remember, they're our number one customer, but we're their number one customer. You hear about all these deals he's making, and they're good countries, Japan and Korea. But I'll give you an example with Japan. He said he made this beautiful deal and everything, and God bless him. But they buy $79 billion worth of products, U.S., off of the U.S. Canada buys $359 billion U.S. off the folks south of the border. 9 million Americans wake up every single morning to produce a widget or a good just for Ontario alone. Those 9 million jobs are in jeopardy right now. We buy more products off the U.S. than Japan, Korea, China, the U.K., and France combined. So I wouldn't roll over, and I've told the Prime Minister, do not roll over, hit that guy back as hard as we possibly can, and that's what we need to do, and we can do it. We can build anything here in Canada, absolutely anything, from the beautiful trains that we build here to the planes, to automobiles, to satellites, to jet engines, and the list could go on and on and on. And our strength are the people. We have the brightest people anywhere in the world right here in Ontario. So when everyone goes out, another very powerful tool are the people of Canada. When you go out and you go to buy a product, just flip it around the back and see where it's manufactured. And buy Canadian when you can, anything possible. And I got to call one company out that I learned when I was, just 2 days ago, I met with all these tin can users and their food products. You know, is a company called Campbell's Soup. They told me that Campbell's Soup's putting a Canadian flag on their cans. They closed their plants here. They moved everything down to the U.S. and they put recipe made in Canada. What sort of nonsense is that? Don't let them hoodwink you. I'm going to call them out again. I'm going to show you one of their cans. It's unacceptable that they do that. You know, don't try to pull one over people's eyes. Canadians are too smart for that. So please, when you go shopping, I know it's not always possible, buy Canadian as much as you can. So we're going to win this thing. And one way or another, we're going to go down and we're going to roll over. We'll keep fighting every single day.
Un dato interesante para los espectadores fuera de Canadá. Doug Ford solía ser parte del llamado Maple MAGA. Era cercano a Trump. Es más, hasta llegó a apoyar ciertas políticas. Pero desde que comenzaron el tema de las guerras comerciales contra Canadá, pues Ford cambió radicalmente su postura. Ahora está hombro a hombro con el primer ministro canadiense, Mark Carney, defendiendo al país. Aquí lo vemos una vez más en otra parte de su discurso.
Folks, we all know this is a serious time for our province and our country. With President Trump taking direct aim at our economy. His goal is to take every single business out of our country, out of our province, and bring it down to the U.S. But I'll tell you, I will fight like I've never fought before, and we're going to continue fighting against President Trump and his radical views. I better stop there because I'll get on a rant. And I'll just tell you, our government is doing everything in its power to cut red tape and make Ontario and Canada the strongest economy in the G7. Our government has a plan to protect Ontario. And I always say our job is not only protect Ontario, but protect communities, protect families, protect jobs and businesses. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And I will not spare a penny to make sure we do it. We were going to protect Ontario from President Trump's tariffs by building a province that is more competitive, more resilient, and more self-reliant. As part of that plan, we're increasing our historic plan to build Ontario to more than $200 billion in infrastructure.
Recordemos que todo esto ocurre tras este anuncio de los aranceles del 35% impuesto por Estados Unidos. Va dirigido a productos no cubiertos por el acuerdo de la USMCA. Aunque el 85% del comercio en sí no está afectado por estar protegido por ese tratado, esto, señores, sigue siendo una guerra comercial. Una guerra absurda contra el que supuestamente tendría que ser tu mejor aliado. El secretario de Comercio de Trump, Howard Lutnick, incluso públicamente dijo que los aranceles eran represalia porque Canadá reconoció al Estado palestino. Escuchemos este nivel de ridiculez.
But Canada, I take it, not so much or not so good.
Well, imagine like the president truthed out that the Canadians put out, oh, we're going to recognize the Palestinian state. I mean, come on, don't be so tone deaf, right? The president is totally into trying to get peace in Gaza, and you're throwing your hat in the ring from Canada. Come on. You know, they still haven't solved dairy. They still have two countries on the whole world retaliated against the United States of America tariffs. China, which we all know, and Canada. So, you know what? I just don't see the president stepping off the gas. Now, Mark Carney came down, had a really nice lunch with the president when he first got elected. You know, if he makes that call and if he starts turning on the charm and if he takes off his retaliation, and stops the silliness, maybe the president will let it down a bit. But right now, 35%, that letter he sent is surely in the cards.
Ahora bien, volviendo al mensaje de Ford tras los aranceles, esto es lo que publicó. Canadá no debe conformarse con menos del acuerdo justo. No es el momento de rendirse. Debemos mantenernos firmes. Es más, añadió que si es necesario, el gobierno canadiense debería de imponer aranceles del 50% a productos estadounidenses, como lo es el acero y el aluminio. Y bueno, amigos, tienes razón, porque Canadá tiene lo que Estados Unidos necesita, que es energía, minerales críticos, electricidad, uranio, acero. Amigos, mantiene empleos para millones de estadounidenses. Literalmente, Canadá ha estado construyendo una economía más resiliente, más autosuficiente. Ha estado reforzando sus cadenas de suministros internas. Sinceramente, es lo mejor que pueden hacer frente a un régimen como el que intenta implementar Trump. Y bueno, ¿qué fue lo que realmente encendió a Trump? Y este fue el anuncio del primer ministro Carney. Canadá ha estado comprometido desde hace tiempo con una solución de dos estados, un estado palestino independiente, viable y soberano que viva junto al Estado de Israel en paz y seguridad. Sin duda, pues eso fue lo que enfureció a Trump, y esto fue lo que lo sacó de quicio.
Earlier this week, the Minister of Foreign Affairs represented Canada at the UN high-level conference on a two-state solution in New York. In recent days, I've spoken with our allies, including President Macron, Prime Minister Starmer, President von der Leyen. I've also had a number of discussions with our ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Ray. International cooperation is essential to securing lasting peace and stability in the Middle East, and Canada will do its best to help lead that effort. Canada has long been committed to a two-state solution. An independent, viable and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security. For decades, it was hoped that this outcome would be achieved as part of a peace process built around a negotiated settlement between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority. Regrettably, this approach is no longer tenable. Prospects for a two-state solution have been steadily and gravely eroded, including by the pervasive threat of Hamas terrorism to Israel and its people, culminating in the heinous attack of October 7, 2023, the terrorist organization Hamas's long-standing violent rejection of Israel's right to exist and its rejection of a two-state solution. The accelerated settlement building across the West Bank and East Jerusalem, all the while settler violence against Palestinians has soared, has also undermined the process, as have actions such as the E1 settlement plan and this month's vote by the Knesset calling for the annexation of the West Bank, and the ongoing failure of the Israeli government to prevent the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian disaster in Gaza, with impeded access to food and other essential humanitarian supplies. The deepening suffering of civilians leaves no room for delay in coordinated international action to support peace, security, and the dignity of human life. Preserving a two-state solution means standing with all people who choose peace over violence or terrorism. And it means honoring their innate desire for peaceful coexistence of Israeli and Palestinian states as the only roadmap for secure and prosperous long-term. Canada will be a constructive partner in building a just, meaningful, and lasting peace in the region, and a future that respects the dignity, security, and the aspirations of all Palestinians and Israelis. We say the devastation in the Middle East is deeply personal to many Canadians. Palestinian Canadians are watching as communities across Gaza face destruction and deprivation, and as communities in the West Bank are annexed. The heinous attacks of October 7th traumatized the Jewish people in Israel and here in Canada and around the world. With each day that the remaining hostages and the remains are not returned, families live in fear and grief. The rising anti-Semitism and words, actions, and violence, including against Jewish communities right here in Canada, is abhorrent. And it's why we're introducing legislation this fall that will make it a criminal offense to intentionally and willfully obstruct access to any place of worship, to schools and community centers. We will also invest in the physical protection of vulnerable communities and places of worship. Basic security is an inalienable right of every human being. We'll defend that right for every Canadian. The two-state solution that Canada supports is built on the promise of Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in peace and security.
Como era de esperarse, la opinión pública en Canadá, señores, lo refleja. Según las últimas encuestas por parte de Pew Research, solo el 22% de los canadienses confían en Trump. Estamos hablando de uno de los niveles más bajos de aprobación jamás registrados. Pero la cosa no se queda ahí, porque el boicot canadiense ha empezado a golpear fuerte. El turismo en Palm Springs ha caído. En Las Vegas, los ingresos de los trabajadores se ha desplomado a la mitad. Florida también está sintiendo el impacto. Y no, señores, el ridículo plan de Trump de eliminar los impuestos a las propinas no ayudó. De hecho, fue un truco tipo marketing, sin impacto real. Fue pura publicidad. El boicot va en serio. Y todo eso gracias al liderazgo de Canadá frente a este régimen que encarcela inmigrantes, ataca minorías, impone políticas fascistas y miente sin parar. Así que, señores, Canadá está haciendo lo correcto. Está diciendo no a Trump. Está liderando con principios, con dignidad y con fuerza.